Great day, huh?
Okay, everybody. We need to get organized here. Anybody doesn't know me, I'm Ed Perkins. I organize these events. If anybody does not get the email announcements, you can give me your email address on this and you can be put on the email list. We also have a Facebook page. You can check the Facebook page. You got to maximize carpooling. So who has the biggest cars?
Break built the foundation. And then we realized that we could cantilever off a fairly small room down there to have a bigger space up here. And we did have a local architect whose name I don't remember, properly designed the top part so it's proper.
Let's replace it just at the right place. Where you can put storage.
Yeah, we have a curved stairway. Even that's a little hard to carry stuff up like furniture.
So we're on the north side of the house here. As Shelley pointed out, 2 flaws in the design of the house. No closets and no bedroom. Well, hey, I was a bachelor when I started this. Put clothes in a backpack and stuck it in the corner, didn't I? But it's okay, so she actually financed this part of the house. The bedroom is going to be up to that wall, and we've got 2 big closets. One is for clothes and one is for storage. And it's not super duper insulated. 2x6 walls with dense pack insulation. They blow in the fiber wet. And it's got quite a high R value. Then there's a lot of insulation up in the attic. Cellulose.
But they blow it in wet.
Yeah, it packs it in real dense. Insulation company said that it was what we call wall pack, what you put in the walls. What's in the floor he called dense pack. It all seems pretty similar stuff to me. Dense pack in the floor, wall pack in the walls, and just blown fiber up top. And it works very well, except in the coldest weather we never have to worry about the place freezing up, although we did put a little ventless gas space heater in the basement. But we've got 2 really big closets in there. Up top there, that's the area for the leads to the attic there where the insulation's blown.
What's this big pipe?
That's the chimney pipe. Basically, it's going to, we're going to put some rat cage type stuff around it, to keep things away from it. Well, actually, get quite a bit of heat out of that.
It just radiates from the metal?
Yeah, it's just warm, And we use glass wool. The insulation are actually it's made out of some kind of lava. Supposedly the stuff that you can put next to a chimney pipe and it won't create a fire hazard. I was told that David White Services used that.
What kind of wood is your doors made out of?
Oh boy, barnwood, old barnwood.
Brian made them off of, just like copper.
Yes. Yeah, Jay is quite the...
He loves making the doors. Bathroom door is sassafras, right?
There's the composting privy with ribs on the outside. And the nice thing about that is with the fan going all the time, you never even need to use the overhead fan after you do number 2 because all the snow just gets sucked right down. Dries out the tile.
So you don't need an no, I mean like if you take a shower or something.
Oh, we do have an overhead fan for that. Yeah, we don't have to use it for toiletry stuff.
Can you talk about your water system?
Sure, we'll go down and have a look at that.
Cook stove?
Yeah, well, just a propane stove.
You're on propane.
That stove is a peerless stove sold by Backwoods Solar that's very, very popular at off-grid houses because there's no electronics in it whatsoever. Well,
No pilot light.
It does have an electronic sparker that has a bunch of 1.5 volt batteries. Like 10 1.5 volt batteries give you 12 volts, and it runs off of that.
So that's the ignition from the battery.
Those are just like flashlight batteries, and we've asked them to if we can hook it up to 12 volts directly, and they say no. I don't know why not, but I'd like to do that at some point. We are going to have radiant floor heating, even though we're going to mainly heat with wood here. We do have propane usage here, so we have a tank out there. So we're not completely independent of fossil fuels here, which we were. 2-inch full insulation on the outside of the wash. And the idea of that was in order to keep the thermal mass in the block, you know, to get the block, so you heat the place up, heat soaks into the block, and it doesn't diffuse, the insulation keeps it in there. And then, so thermal heat storage essentially, once you get the place heated up, it stays hot for a long time, stays comfortable for a long time. And also, once it gets really cold in winter, it takes a whole lot of wood to get the place warmed up.
Once it's warm, you get all that thermal storage.
Yeah.
So you say there's 2 inches of foam insulation on the outside?
Yeah, and then over that, you know, like last summer we did this, Paul Wilson and I went out and screened, put this diamond lath over the whole, everything on the outside there. And then Wes Thompson and Ben Stewart came along and they put a stucco on.
Oh, nice.
And then also Wes and crew put the sandplaster on the inside here. That you see the like the coating here. Of course they painted it with water-colored paint, like it was made by Kills, and they assured me it's not toxic. And then they put over a base coat and then the final color coat sandplaster. So it came out nice, I think. Sandplaster. So much better than it did when it was block. This is going to be for the radiant floor heating system. It's going to be radiant floor for most of the house, but the radiant radiators in the bedroom. And the reason we did that is because, well, I was going to put a forced air furnace in here, for insurance purposes and just for emergencies. And then, some people talked some sense into me, stuff I didn't know and wasn't really considering, because I'd never be able to really use it because a forced air furnace can pull like a ton of electricity. This system here just pulls just a tiny amount. These LCID pumps here are super low.
This propane?
This is propane.
This is propane.
It can run on propane or natural gas, yeah.
On-demand propane water heater, basically.
It's a heater for the radiant floor heating system.
Oh, the radiant floor heating.
That heats water.
It does heat water, yeah. And also, at some point in the future, we are going to have that fill the water heater too. Because the water heater is like, maybe 70% efficient if you're lucky. This is like 97%, So we'll probably use this for domestic hot water heating as well at some point. These LCID pumps are 24-volt pumps. And we have a 48-volt solar system here. So basically we have this device here, which is a DC to DC voltage reducer. We'll take the 48 volts and turn it down to 24 volts to run these pumps.
So you say this is ventless?
No, is it ventless? This isn't ventless, no.
Oh, okay.
It's high efficiency, and the venting actually goes out of a plastic pipe. We'll run a plastic pipe out the wall.
Just so do you have the hole for the wall yet?
We don't have the hole yet, no.
It's just flexible pipe, flexible tubing or whatever you use for the venting?
It's just going to be like PVC grade pipe. It's just going to be like 2-inch.
Nice.
Yeah.
How much?
How much? What did I pay for this? It was a couple $1,000s, Because I bought the LCID pumps and this on the same order, I forget. I think it was close to $2,000 for that. Very expensive.
And then the tubing and...
Yeah, we haven't done that yet. That's the next project we got here, and that's we're going to be running the tubing under the floors.
You're going to run tubing up against the OSB floor.
Yes, insulation under it. That's going to be to heat the upstairs and downstairs. When Danny did some of the work down here, he ran PEX pipe, in the floor.
There's already pipe in this floor.
There's pipe in this floor, yeah, but not for the upstairs. And for the bedroom, Jay Ryan had suggested, well, maybe I should run some PEX pipe under the floor. I thought, well, I could never do that, and so I didn't have him do it. And so we can't run floor heating in there. We're going to have to run radiators in the bedroom. We won't do that, but that'll be just fine. In order to do that, we'd have to lose it, tear out all this stuff and have tons of insulation everywhere, and then we'd have to blow insulation back in. So it's not worth it at this point. But I think we're just going to go zigzagging like so. And then
one on each section, one pipe.
Yeah, that'll just zigzag, you know, from back to front, you know.
Going this way.
Or going this way.
Going this way.
Oh, I'm sorry, going this way, and then, you know, after we get down to the end there, then we'll
Cut through, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and this will be right up against the OSB.
I think it goes right up against it, yeah.
And then over that, you put insulation.
Yeah, well, under that you put insulation.
Which would be what we would be looking at, there'd be insulation.
When
we
you were
would be
looking up,
at,
there's
or-
insulation when it's done.
Yeah, yeah. And it won't be fiberglass probably. I think it's going to be some kind of board insulation. That's what I've seen by YouTubing this subject, you know, that's what kind of insulation they put up there.
Some kind of foam board.
I think so, yeah, something like that. This is a two-temperature, it's going to be a two-temperature setup. And it is done with a mixing valve, because this will make the water quite hot, you know, for the radiators, but it'll mix the water going out for the underfloor, because underfloor you don't have as hot a water as radiators. So that's the next project here.
Where are you getting your water from?
Okay, the water comes from rain.
So you have a catchment system?
Yeah, we haven't ruled anything out, but, you know, if it works, it's eligible for now, you know. And it's been 30 years in progress, so you'll work on it for another 30 years and come back. Okay, well, this can heat the water, and I can use our existing water tank or not. We have a special tank with coils that go through it, and it circulates the fluid that's in your pipe, you know, that goes that is heated in here, and those coils heat the water in that pipe that they go through, and then from that tank, you can actually pump the water, you know, into another tank for your hot water. So we're planning to do that, something like that at some point. But we're also planning on having a solar input for the hot water.
Well, there's a hot water tank back there.
This is the hot water tank, yes, propane hot water tank.
That's the propane heated water.
Right,
And this will be propane heated.
right, exactly. And that might actually take the place of this at some point. Add some more solar modules, and in the summer, even with air conditioning going, we have a tremendous amount of excess power. And we'd like to dump that power into the hot water. So it's really complicated, haven't got that far.
You said the fluid that circulates in this pump, is that water or is that another fluid?
Yeah, I think we're just going to run plain water in that. A lot of times we put antifreeze in there too.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Propane supplement.
How safe is it for drinking water? I mean, it's as safe as everything. What do you use for glues? Do you use any glues or just connectors?
Pressure fit. The fittings are called shark bite fittings, and they fit on, and you can clamp them, or there's another pipe that has a bar running the opposite way that.
Oh, so it's like a one-way valve.
You can disconnect it, it's a big advantage. Like with PVC, you gotta glue it.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah,
cut it
glue it
and
like
replace it.
Something's
It's
wrong.
PVC
Cut it
too.
off and start over again.
It wants polyvinyl chloride to drink. For easy maintenance.
Right. So basically, this is like a really simple system. Is you know, so much simpler than as Dana can tell you, as David can tell you, as Ed can tell you. This is so simple compared to any of yours.
Oh, it is?
You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's simpler.
But yeah, it's a basic straight off-grid system. There's no grid connection here, so it doesn't have to do much except produce electricity all the time. And this is a Magnum inverter. This might look somewhat familiar to Ed, who has one. That looks familiar. Huh? Looks kind of similar,
It's the
yeah.
same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, this 48 volt uses 24. That's the only difference. These are lead acid. These are deep cycle batteries, or the off-cart batteries. They're the least expensive battery, you know, that works well for the system. Do require maintenance, and when I need to water them, you know, I pull one of those hoses out, and, you know, and you got to be careful touching these because they got hydrochloric acid. Periodically, these batteries need to be watered.
How often is periodically?
It really varies. It was almost never when they were brand new. Now, like, oh, every couple months maybe or something. Noise is, there's a vent fan here, and what that does, anytime the battery voltage is high, like when the sun's shining and the batteries are fully charged, it's just floating the batteries, or it's doing more than that. You know, these create a lot of fumes. It can be hydrogen, which is an explosion hazard, or it can be sulfuric acid fumes, which stink like heck, and you probably don't want to be breathing those either. So this vent here, this is controlled by a relay in there's a relay in there, a charge controller. So the relay, whenever the voltage reaches a certain level, the relay closes, and it sucks the sucks the fumes out.
12-volt batteries?
No, these are 6-volt batteries. Okay, there's six 6-volt batteries. 6 times 8, 48 volts.
4 and 4, yeah, okay.
And lead acid?
Lead acid, yeah. The deep cycle batteries. What that means is the car battery is not supposed to cycle down more than about 15%. I mean, I know they do sometimes go dead. It's not good for them. These are made to cycle down on a regular basis 50%. So we try to maintain that down to 50% state of charge.
Catch the square footage of your home. The square footage.
Square footage, I think we're about 1,400.
Oh,
I think it's somewhere around there.
is that the toilet up there?
That's the laundry machine. The toilet. Better stand clear.
Oh, yeah. So with the batteries, there's no outgassing of sulfuric acid or any of the other things, is there?
Right, you got deep cycle batteries, Concord batteries. Well, they're sealed. They're valve regulated lead acid batteries. Under some circumstances, they can let out some. And if you smell your batteries, you know you got a problem. You're not supposed to. And it means that they're at the end of their life cycle. In general, you just don't need to, you don't need to worry about venting up to the outside like you do these.
So on cloudy winter days, how much power do you think you have here to run the essentials in your house?
Right, I think on a cloudy winter day we're going to end up running a generator if we got too many of them in a row. I think we could probably go, 3 days. The refrigerator is the big load here.
So you would think 3 days these batteries could run you without a lot of solar input?
Yeah, but we'd have to be very, very conservative with our energy use, but I think we get by 3 days. And we haven't put it to the test yet. This wire here that goes to one of these 2 wires goes to a generator, like this one. It goes to a plug for a generator. We can plug in a generator and charge up the batteries through this inverter. Like your system, the grid charges your batteries to the inverter.
Yeah.
But this one will be a generator, and a generator will start the generator, plug in the plug, and
Is the generator here installed?
it's not installed. It's just a portable unit.
Where does your wiring go?
Okay, well, it's that orange wire that goes around there, that goes out there, and that's for the generator.
Okay, so it's out there, okay. So there's an inlet thing on the outside of the...
Right, just exactly like you have at your house.
Fed by propane, the generator?
The generator is just a gasoline generator. You just carry it in and pull the cord and hope it starts.
So what all do you have that's electric? You said your refrigerator would use a lot. What else do you have that's electric? Lights?
Just the lighting and music and stuff, and air conditioning.
Air conditioning I'd probably use a lot.
And we're going to have a whole relay set up to drop loads when the battery gets low. So we can go away and leave the air conditioning going all day long, and then if we don't get home on time, the air conditioner will drop out as soon as the batteries get a little bit low. And that's part of this setup here. So far I've only got one relay, and that's for the fan for the privy. That little relay driver there, it'll drop out loads when the batteries start to drop and charge. And you might notice all the lights are lit on that right now. All the lights are lit. And that means that the battery voltage is high, and so that none of the loads that need to be shut off would be shut off. The batteries are 100% full right now.
So, what kind of propane storage are you going to have?
Propane, we just have a tank.
How big a tank?
What is that? It's out back, I think, what is one of those things, 500 gallons or something like that?
Okay, so you're going to get a propane truck up that driveway?
We have, oh yeah, they've come up, yeah. Yeah, we've had cement mixers come up the truck, we've had Carter lumber, and yeah, all kinds of big trucks, you know. And if the road's mushy, then we find more gravel.
I was noticing all the gravel you got.
Oh, man. So this is the inverter here, and this inverter changes the battery, 48 volt battery power into a 120, 240 volt AC power. And so this is what turns it into regular house power. Is, you know, AC. And this is kind of like the control box for this thing. It also is a monitor, so we're 100% charged right now, as you can see. Batteries are fully charged. The only thing running is the refrigerator. We've had plenty of sun lately.
What's the 50C mean?
SOC, state of charge.
Oh, okay.
And this is the charge controller right here. So it tells you that right now the batteries are in float. That's are coming in from the solar. And that takes the 90 volt power off the roof, and it turns it into 48 volts to charge the batteries.
So how many panels are on your roof?
We have 12 modules, and they are REC 235s. You can see the modules are actually facing due south. And there is a little problem with snow getting caught in the corners. So in really snowy weather, we got to get up there with a snow rake and kind of pull it away. Which isn't the best thing in the world, but you tend to have to do that with solar arrays anyway if you're living off grid.
Drink of water, anybody? Good, thank you. Drink of water would be nice. Drink of water? Thank you. Come on in, we can have this going back out.
Calling people back to
If they want, but I brought, I don't know what it is.
You must have.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of kids come and see my solar
Yeah.
panels. At that time, I was the only one living with solar, so.
Yeah.
For years and years.
And we did the wildflowers. Paul took us for a wildflower hike.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's check out this deck.
Didn't really get an intro into what, anybody, solar is your biggest interest? Okay.
Mine?
Yeah. All right. I mean, sustainable living network is a big topic.
It is a big topic.
One of those renewable energy that is carbon negative. So by having a byproduct of charcoal or biochar, you wind up taking carbon out. Well, the trees or the plant material takes the carbon out of the atmosphere. You burn off the hydrogen and oxygen and leave the carbon skeleton, essentially. The gasifier we'll look at in a moment is wood pellets. It's already been tested on wood chips and walnut hulls. I'm getting interested in nuts for pressing oil and for running the meat of the nut through a poultry operation or a brewing operation, and then drying the shells and then running that through this system that'll make electricity, hot water. This system makes 1 kilowatt continuous of electricity, 24 kilowatts a day, and 30,000 BTUs of hot water. So the water is circulated through to cool the bottom end of it, and the Stirling engine runs off of a temperature differential, hot at the top and cold at the bottom. As cool as you can get it is the more efficient you can go with it.
I've been off the grid for 38 years now. I've watched every winter the same bottleneck, the same need to really conserve because you don't have any backup systems. Well, I don't like running generators, so I don't do that much. But this is like the perfect fit because these solar hot water panels over here run into a hot water system in the house. So I've got a solar hot water, and solar photovoltaic system for electricity, right? When there's no sun, you have neither. So this thing fills that gap beautifully. And the time of the year when you need heat, you need hot water, and you need electricity. So it's quite a nice fit. There's still plenty of glitches. This is a beta unit, first of its kind, really in a residential setting out of the shop. That's the big piece because it crosses over into forest ecology. There's an opportunity to remove wood, to reduce fuel loads. We're looking at some massive fire danger coming anytime. And so you can reduce the fuel load by harvesting some of the wood, sort of mimicking what the native peoples were using fire ecology to do for thousands of years. Except we have the opportunity to displace fracking, mountaintop removal, coal, tar sands, etc. in this iteration of it. The other thing that happens is that you reduce the competition between trees, you get a higher nut production, you get better wildlife habitat, and then you're left with a more open understory, which is really nice for forest farming. Medicinal plants, mushrooms, maple syrup, the whole gamut of an economy that we've just kind of haven't paid enough attention to. I talk a lot about recognizing the difference between principle and interest in biological systems. So if you understand what nature's doing, it's building natural capital to basically endure the next disturbance pattern, whatever that's going to be, depending on your ecology and zone on the planet. Its ability to get up from a serious blow is always based on natural capital having been generated. So the less natural capital, the less resilience that system has. Okay? So when you're thinning this forest and moving this material into a form that can go back into the soil, it's essentially reverse mining. Instead of going down and taking oil and coal out of the earth, you're basically taking it from the atmosphere and putting it back into a part of the earth that is serving biological systems rather than way down deep, pumping carbon, sequestering carbon and pumping it way down into some aquifer or below that, right? Doing nothing good. So this is actually serving the living things in the biosphere. The saltwater Aqueon battery, which is a major breakthrough from the really bogus lead-acid batteries. If anybody's using them, you know what I'm talking about. And the reason is many, but it's not only the toxicity of lead, but the total inferiority of being able to only cycle it to 50% instead of 100%, which these will cycle to 100. You get 3 times the number of cycles, so that's 6. With not being toxic and not having to vent it out and lose heat while you're venting it, you can put them right in your house. They can go to a lower temperature without losing power. So a lead-acid battery will lose 50% of its electricity at 32 degrees, where I doubt you'll lose more than about 10% on these. But there's no need to put them in a cold place because you worry about explosions. You don't have to worry about people fighting wars to get the material to build more of them and so on.
Are these like a flow system where you're flowing this stuff, or
no? It's
just like a battery,
it's a battery, and there's no maintenance on it. That's another value. There's nothing to top up. There's nothing that can go wrong.
Just
essentially,
leave it to Americans to have something so simple that they
right. Of course, they went bankrupt. But
what's the disadvantage then?
What kind of batteries is this again?
They're a little pricey. Aqueon.
Okay.
Now they went bankrupt, and they're not being very nice to the people who bought them originally, and then they came out of bankruptcy. They're not honoring any warranties or anything like that, so I'm not impressed with that piece of what they're doing.
So they have a patent and they're not allowing people to...
Some major, I don't know if China or somebody's got a big percentage of the new company, or whatever they're doing, they're not honoring the previous, and they're going to be changing the form factor of the battery in ways that I'm not sure of. They claim that they're going to be better. But so far so good. I've gone on 3 years on these, and there's been...
They claim the form factor are going to be smaller.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't really care that much about that. That's not a big deal to me.
Well, but there's nothing toxic about the battery.
Right. Salt water, manganese, carbon.
Yep. Could you explain how they work?
Not really. Drake might have a better sense.
Drake,
It's an
explain it.
aqueous.
Well, I am no expert on the chemistry of aqueous batteries, but I know you can generate electricity from saltwater ponds, and it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
I think it's just ionization, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ionize the particles and then they go to the anode or the cathode and charging and...
Yeah, it works, is all I can tell you. It's
How old is this
my
thing?
life got a lot smoother since
What's
I've...
the history of this technology?
Yeah.
Does it
It's
go way back?
relatively new. No,
Is
I
it
don't
new?
think so. Not that I know. Not with this.
It's new.
It's relatively new.
Who invented
It's a
it?
group out of, I forget the guy's name, but they're out of Pennsylvania. They manufactured them south of Pittsburgh.
And he was at Carnegie Mellon.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
He was trying to come up with a battery that was sourced from benign and widely available materials, as opposed to lead
Right.
or even lithium.
Yeah.
But that's
My understanding is
what
they
it
borrowed too much money from Bill Gates, and then the Tesla battery facility dropped the price of the Powerwall, which they're apples and oranges. They don't compare. I mean, the Powerwall is not even close to an alternative to this battery, but most people don't know that, and it did a number on their plans for getting cash flow going. So anyway, that's a nutshell of that. Why don't we take a look at those two things. What happens here is these wood pellets, or you can do wood chips. This burner will have to be a different diameter for wood chips because there's a different power density in the wood pellet versus a wood chip. Walnut hull seems to be about the same, so this same burner could be used. So this is just an auger system, and there's a little sonar unit that clips on the top and then reads the depth to keep the depth at the right place. You start it on propane or natural gas. I've got natural gas, and so you'd light it here. There's a whole computer interface that I'm not going to get into. Basically, you get this hot, you have some charcoal that you start with, and you get those hot coals. By the time the wood goes into it, you start pyrolyzing here.
Is that where the combustion actually is taking place?
Yeah.
Right where your hands are?
This is where the pyrolysis zone, the gases come out of the pyrolysis. And there's an auger that, based on temperatures and a number of things, will auger that, and the biochar builds up down here. So you'll let that out every 12 hours. And then, so you start it manually, and once it goes on to automatic, it's theoretically supposed to just go for a very long time until you need to clean it out. So the gases come out of here into this chamber. Where you're standing, you can look under and see the Stirling engine in front of you. Now that's in the down position. It's in a protection mode right now, but that metal plate comes over and it rises up into the roughly 1800 degrees zone here.
Oh, so okay, that's hot end.
Then there's the hot water loop. I've got a very simple one right now. This isn't going to be the way it's going to always be. We can walk inside and take a look. It's just going into a Ford radiator, basically, right? And it's blowing the heat into the house. There's about 700 degrees going up this chimney here. So I just bought this heat exchanger from the UK used, and this will bolt on and take 3 times more heat than is presently being captured back into the house instead of losing it out the chimney. So I'm seeing this as like a thermal PTO almost, where we could bolt on different things like this. If you want hot water, you could do a dryer for drying things. You could do maple syrup. You could do apple butter. I mean, use your imagination, anything with heat. So eventually, when I get all that worked out, we're going to run it all the way to the other side to the hot water tank, the solar hot water tank that the solar thermal panels heat, right? And then I've got a loop in the floor. I can do hydronic heating in the floor. We can put in baseboard heaters, all of that. So nice thing about hot water is once you have it, you can pump it anywhere you want it. You can run it through your towel rack in your bathroom just to warm your towels or whatever you want to do, right? You can always use hot water in the wintertime when it's dark and cold, and then the extra electricity. The thing I'll say about the saltwater batteries is you get 3,000 full cycles out of those, right? You're going to use most of those cycles in the wintertime when you're deep cycling because you don't have anything coming in. If this is running 24/7 and you're topping those batteries up every day, you're going to be really extending the life of those batteries, or any batteries. Right. If you had 12 of those batteries, you would pay for this thing pretty much on that alone if it doubled the lifespan of the batteries. But then there's probably 10 other layers of economics that you'd have to add up to make sense of this.
Can you explain the electricity piece of it again?
Batch, where it's a continuous system, and to get it to produce electricity is really a new thing.
And how are you
Who
getting
makes
the...
a Stirling engine?
This is made right here in Athens at Stirling Tech.
Well, microgen is on the label. I think it's actually
Oh.
made in Europe and it's licensed to be resold
Yes,
here.
so this was originally designed
Developed
by
here.
William Beale. The rights to build it were sold to the Netherlands. Some of the folks that worked with him back in the day are putting the rest of this whole thing together, except the Stirling engine itself is coming from the Netherlands. It's produced there.
Well, who actually puts this system together and sells it?
Stirling Tech in Athens.
Oh. Stirling Tech.
But just looking at a poultry situation where they've got ammonia meters in there, and so when the ammonia gets up to a certain point, the vents open, fans kick on, and propane heaters kick on if it's 55 degrees or cooler, right? So if you put charcoal, like a 1 inch on the bedding, they will peck it and eat some of it, and that'll do good things for protection of all sorts of things, decontaminate. But it'll absorb, every pound of biochar will absorb 25 cents worth of nitrogen, 20 cents worth of nitrogen in the form of ammonia. So it's going to pull that ammonia gas into the charcoal. It'll save the nitrogen for the biological soil cycle instead of pumping it into the atmosphere. And it's going to keep those vents and the fans and the heaters from running, so you're saving all of those pieces.
So you talked about putting carbon on the floor, but you're really talking about putting biochar on the
Biochar,
floor.
yeah. It's
I
carbon.
want to reinforce the charcoal.
But it's different from like store-bought, not the mass-produced charcoal, but like the natural hardwood charcoal because there's greater surface area or something?
There's a difference in surface area with activated charcoal that you're taking in pill form. All you have to do is take 3 times as much and you'll match that. So you don't have to do activated to get that effect. But the stuff you buy for cooking, it can have different levels of creosote-type compounds, volatiles in it. And you want to do it at a high enough temperature. If you're feeding it to livestock or you're putting it in the soil, you want to... And there's some simple tests. There's expensive tests. The Europeans have got a really sophisticated system of testing. And you can pay fairly good money to do that. Otherwise, you can smear some on your skin and see if it washes off with water. You can taste it and see if you're getting anything other than a neutral taste. And you can then mix it in a potting soil that you know is good, and then take some with and some without, and plant the same seeds, and you should get at least as good of a germination rate. And so that's the low-tech, cheaper way to do it. Most things, we have the senses. We have sense of smell and taste, but there's a whole conversation about nutrient density in food around that. If you go to the archaeological digs and find 5,000-7,000-year-old archaeological sites, and the fire pits that they find, you still got charcoal in them.
Yes.
And that's, so 1% of organic matter in the soil, whether it's charcoal or other type of organic matter, holds 28,000 gallons of water per acre. So that's just the water piece. So there's porosity, there's aeration, there's cations, anions, binding of heavy metals, on and on and on and on. So this is a huge paradigm shift over anything we've ever seen.
When the system is running, what does it sound like?
It's fairly quiet. If you use the standard battery, you're usually getting 6-volt batteries and you're putting them all together to get 48 volts, right? And if one goes bad, what do you do? Right?
Replace it.
Well, you're not supposed to put new batteries with old batteries, so now you got a whole bunch of batteries that are compromised, right? If one would go bad, you just pull it out and you're still good to go. Check out the size of these wires at 48 volt compared to, if anybody's done 12-volt systems. You know, you got the big ass cables and those.
What's the voltage per battery?
48. Inverter is a 48-volt inverter. So I've got a 48-volt bank with solar panels are coming in and translating that into 48 volts.
So there could be a stack up of something. Are those like the manufacturer?
Yeah, I think these are actually separate little batteries. I think each one of these.
Is each of these a separate?
I believe it is. They all.
And then there's eight cells, right? So there's
Yeah, you could
Four,
probably do the math.
4
there.
in each, and then 8. Yeah.
Right, so each of these are separate. Right, but they all function as a 148 volt battery.
And I filled the salt water.
Salt water, manganese, carbon.
In a liquid, you're just
You know,
liquid.
yeah,
Everything-
salt water, electrolyte, I guess.
You want to see?
So.
Oh.
Someone said you talked.
proclamation. Whereas, for more than 2 centuries, Americans have been called to defend the founding ideals of our democracy. On Memorial Day, a grateful nation remembers the proud patriots who have served in defense of liberty and justice. And whereas, throughout our nation's history, members of the armed forces have taken great risks to keep America strong and free. They have defended the innocent, freed the oppressed, helped spread the promise of liberty to all corners of this earth. And whereas our nation honors the selfless service of our armed forces, and we acknowledge a debt that is beyond our power to repay. And whereas today, all who wear the uniform of the United States are serving at a crucial hour in history, and each has answered a great call to serve our nation on the front lines of freedom. On this Memorial Day, we gather to remember those heroes who have served our country for the very freedom our flag represents. Now, therefore, I, Steve Patterson, the mayor of the city of Athens, Ohio, do hereby proclaim Monday, May 27th, 2019, as Memorial Day. And I ask all citizens to pay tribute.
I'd like to introduce you to Tom Walker, who's going to say a few words.
I'm the second head of the Ridges Nature Walk. The first head was a guy by the name of Bill Dunlap, the 317 board, ADMH, and he's retiring. I just feel compelled to say something about Bill. He decided that the cemeteries should be beautified. So how long ago was this? Beginning of the century?
About 16 years.
Quite a while ago, he decided that something had to be done about the cemeteries, and he got the CCC, which was the old Roosevelt-era organization that Bush got rid of. It did volunteer work, and it taught young people that needed direction to do hard work. The stairs going up from the dairy barn to the first cemetery, and they did quite a bit of work. It was Bill Dunlap that did that, and I wish him the very best of luck. The very, very overworked grounds person in charge of the Ridges, Susan Calhoun, goes through a special effort every year to make the cemeteries really spick and span, especially for the ceremony. I really want to thank her for that. Now I'll turn this over to our able president, Adrian Nugg.
I just wanted to say to Tom, thank you for starting this 16, 17 years ago, the first Memorial Day ceremony up here. Tom has worked so hard to make this a successful event. The last few years he was out of town, and this year his wife let him be here. So thank you, Tom. I'm president of the Athens chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, and I'm a member of the Ridges Cemetery Committee. I want to welcome all of you and thank the special participants. We have the Reverend Deborah Woolsey of the Church of the Good Shepherd, the Mayor of Athens, Stephen Patterson, Todd Jamrose, DO, Chief Clinical Officer from the Appalachian Behavioral Health Care, Representative Jay Edwards from the Ohio House of Representatives, the Veterans Honor Guard from Athens and Albany, led by Joe Mulligan, singer Sherelle Arocho, and trumpeter Caroline Cade.
Almighty God, Judge of all the nations, we remember before you with grateful hearts the men and women of our country who in the day of decision ventured much for the liberties we now enjoy. Grant that we may not rest until all the people of this land share the benefits of true freedom and gladly accept its disciplines. This we ask in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Us standing here and sitting here, this is hallowed ground of people who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, or from the ultimate sacrifice they internally suffered in eternal suffering with things like post-traumatic stress. That more than 1.1 million men and women have died in wartime throughout the span of our nation's history. That's more than the population of San Francisco or Boston or Seattle or Washington, D.C. More people were killed in World War II than currently live in the city of New Orleans. This, of course, begin to take into account those who were wounded or missing. That number is closer to 2.8 million, just slightly more than the city of Chicago. These numbers should truly humble us because they represent individuals who were brothers, husbands, mothers, sisters, friends. They were people woven into our fabric of community across this nation. Memorial Day is just more than another day off and a segue into the summer. It is a time for reflecting, supporting and giving thanks for the sacrifices of our heroes, what for most of us looks like a 3-day-long weekend of fun, picnics, and parades. To others, it's a day of reoccurring nightmares. Many of our honored veterans of all ages will continue to sacrifice and struggle for the rest of their lives with the invisible wounds of post-traumatic stress. Patriotic holidays can trigger PTS symptoms. For some, these dates and their nightmarish memories are horrific and devastating. For others, it is a gloomy fog hanging over them that they just can't identify. And many of our beloved veterans are plagued with survivor's guilt, the haunting question as to why did I come back alive? These feelings wreak havoc on both our veterans and those around them. For those of us who know or love a veteran or service member who struggles with PTS, the best thing that we can do is care. Listen. Ask questions. Change the narrative. The American Legion hosted a meeting in Washington, D.C. last year for veterans service organizations to discuss the implications of changing the medical classification of post-traumatic stress disorder to post-traumatic stress. Many people think that the entire group of our veterans are all disordered because they have been exposed to combat. But potential employees don't know their personal medical history and can't know for sure if a veteran has PTS or not. We need to overcome the stigma by education and figuring out realistic alternatives. Canada's armed forces calls PTSD operational stress injury. The more we can care for and connect with our vets, the more fulfilled they will be and we will be also. So whether you decide to take a quiet weekend away or if you joined in the Memorial Day Parade, let your veterans know how much you support them, appreciate them, and love them. And although Memorial Day is set aside to honor those who have died in service for our country, we can honor all those who have served. And we must also remember with heartfelt compassion for those Gold Star families who have lost their loved warriors. There could never be enough medals, parades, or memorials to make up for what our warriors have sacrificed. So the least that we can do is honor them and never, ever take our freedoms for granted.
I was recently awarded an award at the State House from NAMI Ohio, the state organization, and while I was humbled and honored to receive the award, I was more grateful the fact that I got to stand on stage with other organizations around the state and brag on the fact that we got one of the best NAMI organizations in the state right here. On this day especially, we should remember the great 19th century humanitarian Dorothea Dix, who just after the Civil War crusaded throughout the country and the world for the creation of beautiful asylums where the mentally ill could be given moral treatment in a respectful setting. The persons buried in this, the oldest Ridges Cemetery, were beneficiaries of Dix's crusade. By the 20th century, however, the picture had changed. Throughout the country, these stately institutions were now overcrowded and subject to scandal. By the late 20th century, the state asylums were closed and their patients released on the pretext that, in the new age of medications, patients could be treated in the community. Money for mental health did not all follow the newly released inmates into society. Instead, it tended to be swallowed up for other state priorities backed by groups and institutions with more political pull. As recently as 15 years ago, most mentally ill were receiving no treatment at all. In the last decade or so, there has been a new emphasis on helping persons with mental illness. The loudest and most persistent non-governmental voice for mental health has been the National Association on Mental Illness at both the state and local levels. For well over a decade, the state government has responded with more money for assisted living and wonderful projects such as the new Adam Amanda Recovery Center here in Athens. I can assure you that mental health is no longer the state's orphan child.
Remember Esther Roizoin, born in 1850. Esther was a loving Christian and an educator. She surrounded herself with family in Zanesville until arriving at the Athens Psychiatric Hospital in 1881. She spent the remainder of her life in the hospital until passing away in 1910. While her diagnosis is unknown, Esther and many others were often misunderstood and poorly diagnosed. This usually meant spending years in a mental hospital for symptoms sometimes as simple as having premenstrual syndrome. Think back on your years in school. Picture one of your teachers who made a special impact. Esther was that special teacher for many students during her life.
Like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down when you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take a part. Oh, when darkness comes and pain is all around, just like a bridge over troubled waters, I will lay me down like a bridge over troubled waters.